Captain Sophia watching from the sidelines as her squadron prepared for what everyone believed would be a routine reconnaissance mission over the Adriatic. The other pilots called her Backup Volkov, always ready, never chosen, forever waiting for her chance to prove she belonged in the cockpit of a fighter jet. What none of them knew was that in less than 6 hours, this backup pilot would fly through a wall of enemy missiles to pull off the most daring rescue mission in NATO history, saving the very pilots who had spent years dismissing her as second string. Before we jump back in, tell us where you're tuning in from, and if this story touches you, make sure you're subscribed, because tomorrow, I've saved something extra special for you. Captain Sophia Volkov had been relegated to the bench for 3 years, 7 months, and 12 days. Not that she was counting. At 29, the Czech-born pilot possessed reflexes that could thread a needle at Mach 2 and tactical knowledge that impressed even veteran squadron commanders during briefings. But when it came time to assign actual combat missions, somehow her name never made it off the standby roster. The 555th Fighter Squadron operated out of Aviano Air Base in northeastern Italy, flying F-16 Fighting Falcons on NATO peacekeeping missions across the Balkans. It was 1999, and tensions in the region had been escalating for months. Every pilot in the squadron knew that their training exercises could turn into real combat operations at a moment's notice. Every pilot except Sophia, apparently, who spent her days running endless simulations and maintaining perfect readiness scores that no one seemed to notice. Her colleagues had nicknamed her Backup Volkov during her first week at Aviano, a title that had stuck like glue despite her consistently outperforming half the squadron in training exercises. Major Rick Thompson, the squadron's informal leader, had established the cool tradition during a mess hall dinner, announcing loudly that Sophia would make an excellent backup pilot when the real fighters needed time off. The laughter that followed had echoed in Sophia's ears for months. What made the dismissal particularly painful was that Sophia had earned her position through merit, not politics. She had graduated 3rd in her class from the Czech Air Force Academy, completed advanced fighter training at Luke Air Force Base in Arizona, and mastered every aircraft system with mathematical precision. Her English, though accented, was flawless. Her tactical assessments during mission planning were frequently adopted by senior officers. Yet when Squadron Commander Colonel James Mitchell assigned flight rosters, Sophia's name consistently appeared under reserve personnel. The other pilots tolerated her presence during briefings and training exercises, but she was never truly included in their brotherhood. Captain Brad Maverick Sullivan, Lieutenant Tommy Ace Rodriguez, and Captain Mike Thunder Johnson formed the squadron's inner circle, 3 American pilots who had been flying together since their academy days. They spoke in a casual shorthand developed over years of shared missions, referring to combat tactics and aircraft capabilities with the confidence of men who had never doubted their place in the cockpit. During flight training exercises, Sophia consistently posted the fastest completion times and most accurate targeting scores. Her ability to execute complex maneuvers while maintaining perfect situational awareness had earned grudging respect from the flight instructors. But somehow, these achievements never translated into actual mission assignments. She had logged more simulator hours than any pilot in the squadron, preparing for combat scenarios that she was never allowed to fly. The discrimination wasn't overtly hostile, just a subtle, persistent exclusion that wore down her confidence, like water carving through stone. During mission debriefings, her tactical suggestions were acknowledged but rarely implemented. When equipment malfunctions occurred, she was expected to handle the paperwork while the real pilots discussed solutions. At squadron social events, conversations would shift to inside jokes and shared experiences that predated her arrival, leaving her standing awkwardly at the periphery of groups that never quite opened to include her. But Sophia possessed something her colleagues didn't recognize: the patience of someone who had been underestimated her entire life. Growing up in Prague during the final years of communist rule, she had learned early that persistence often mattered more than recognition. Her father, a mechanic who had dreamed of becoming a pilot, but was denied the opportunity due to his working class background, had taught her that capability and recognition were two different things entirely. Every morning, Sophia arrived at the flight line before dawn, conducting pre-flight inspections on aircraft she might never fly. She studied intelligence reports for missions she wouldn't be assigned, memorized terrain maps for operations she would only observe from the ground. Her flight suit was always pressed, her equipment always ready, her knowledge always current. She had been preparing for 3 years to prove that Backup Volkov was anything but a second-choice pilot. What none of her squadron mates understood was that Sophia's apparent acceptance of her reserve status masked a burning determination to demonstrate her capabilities when the moment finally arrived. She wasn't waiting for permission or approval. She was waiting for necessity. And on March 24, 1999, necessity would come screaming out of the sky at 500 miles per hour, demanding every skill she had spent years perfecting in silence. The morning briefing on March 24th began like hundreds of others, with Colonel Mitchell outlining routine reconnaissance missions over the Yugoslav border. Intelligence reports indicated increased Serbian military activity near the Albanian frontier, requiring updated aerial surveillance to monitor potential ceasefire violations. For the 555th Fighter Squadron, it represented another day of standard operations, the kind of milk-run missions that had defined their deployment to Aviano. As always, Sophia sat in the back row of the briefing room, taking meticulous notes. While the primary flight crews received their assignments, Captain Sullivan would lead the main reconnaissance flight, with Lieutenant Rodriguez as his wingman. Captain Johnson would command a secondary patrol along the Adriatic coast. The missions were considered routine enough that backup pilots weren't even assigned, a subtle reminder of just how expendable the squadron leadership considered their reserve personnel. "Any questions?" Colonel Mitchell asked, scanning the room with the efficient gaze of a commander who had run identical briefings for 6 months. Sophia raised her hand slightly, then thought better of it and lowered it again. She had learned that questions from reserve pilots were often viewed as unnecessary delays rather than valuable input. The mission parameters were straightforward, the risks minimal, and the expected outcome boringly predictable. After the briefing, the primary pilots gathered around the mission planning table, discussing flight routes and communication protocols with the casual confidence of men who had never doubted their inclusion in important operations. Sophia lingered nearby, close enough to absorb tactical details, but far enough away to avoid accusations of eavesdropping. Her presence was tolerated, but not acknowledged. She had become expert at existing in the margins of conversations that shaped missions she would never fly. "Weather looks good for the next 6 hours," Captain Sullivan announced, reviewing meteorological reports with practiced efficiency. "Visibility unlimited, winds favorable. Should be a straightforward photo reconnaissance run." Lieutenant Rodriguez nodded agreement, already visualizing the flight path they had flown dozens of times before. The familiarity of the mission made it seem almost mundane, certainly not requiring the expertise of pilots who had trained for far more complex combat scenarios. Sophia excused herself from the briefing room and walked to the flight line where ground crews were conducting pre-flight preparations on the F-16S, assigned to the day's missions. She had no official duties during active operations, but she had developed a routine of inspecting backup aircraft and reviewing emergency procedures. Other pilots found her diligence excessive, but Sophia understood that readiness was the only advantage available to someone permanently assigned to the bench, the lead aircraft. Tail number 890156 was Sullivan's usual mount, a Fighting Falcon, with over 2,000 flight hours and a maintenance record that reflected meticulous care. Sophia ran her hands along the aircraft's control surfaces, checking for any signs of fatigue or damage that might compromise performance. Preparing and narrating this story took us a lot of time, so if you are enjoying it, subscribe to our channel. It means a lot to us. Now back to the story. The jet represented everything she had trained for but never been allowed to experience. The opportunity to prove her capabilities in actual combat operations rather than endless simulations. Sergeant Maria Zales, the squadron's lead maintenance chief, approached with her characteristic mix of respect and sympathy. Unlike the pilots, the enlisted personnel had recognized Sophia's expertise early in her deployment. "Morning, Captain," Gonzalez said, reviewing the aircraft's maintenance log. "She's running perfectly. Shame you won't get to take her up today." "Maybe next time," Sophia replied with a smile that didn't quite reach her eyes. It had become her standard response to well-meaning comments about her perpetual reserve status. Maintaining optimism required constant effort when faced with the reality that next time never seemed to arrive for pilots who had been labeled as backup personnel. As the primary flight crews completed their pre-flight preparations, Sophia retreated to the Squadron Operations Center, where she would monitor radio communications throughout the mission. Her role during active operations was limited to maintaining situational awareness and providing ground-based support if requested. She had become expert at tracking multiple aircraft simultaneously, plotting their positions on tactical maps, and anticipating their needs before they requested assistance. The irony wasn't lost on her that she possessed more current intelligence about regional military activities than most of the pilots who were actually flying combat missions. During her months of reserve duty, Sophia had studied every intelligence report, memorized every terrain feature, and analyzed every potential threat scenario. She had prepared for combat operations with the dedication of someone who knew that opportunity, when it finally arrived, would demand perfect performance. At 0800 hours, the primary reconnaissance flight taxied toward the runway, their engines creating the distinctive whine that announced another routine mission beginning. Sophia watched from the operations center window as aircraft she had inspected and prepared carried pilots who had never questioned their right to fly them. Within 3 hours, everything would change. The radio crackled to life at 10:47 hours with a transmission that would shatter the morning's routine. Captain Sullivan's voice carried an edge of tension that immediately commanded attention throughout the operations center. "Aviano Base, this is Falcon 1. We have multiple ground-to-air missile sites active in our reconnaissance zone. Repeat, SAM sites are hot in tracking. This is not a drill." Sophia straightened in her chair, her hand instinctively reaching for the radio controls as Colonel Mitchell rushed into the operations center. The mission that had been planned as a simple reconnaissance flight had suddenly transformed into something far more dangerous. Intelligence reports had failed to detect the Serbian military's deployment of surface-to-air missile batteries along the Albanian border, creating a deadly trap for NATO aircraft operating in what should have been secure airspace. "Falcon 1, maintain altitude and begin evasive maneuvers," Colonel Mitchell commanded over the radio. "What's your current position?" The tactical display showed Sullivan and Rodriguez's aircraft approximately 40 nautical miles northeast of their planned route, having detected the missile threats while conducting routine photographic surveillance. They were deep in hostile territory with limited fuel and multiple enemy systems tracking their every movement. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice joined the emergency communication, his usually confident tone strained with the reality of imminent combat. "Base, we're showing at least 6 active radar signatures. They've got us bracketed from multiple directions, attempting to evade, but these systems are more sophisticated than anything in our intelligence reports." The sophistication of the enemy defenses suggested this wasn't a random deployment, but a carefully planned ambush designed to down NATO. Aircraft. Sophia began plotting the aircraft positions on her tactical map, her extensive study of regional terrain proving invaluable as she calculated potential escape routes. The geography worked against the trapped pilots. They were surrounded by mountainous terrain that limited their maneuvering options, while providing excellent cover for enemy missile sites. Every potential exit route would require flying through valleys where surface-to-air missiles would have clear firing solutions. "Colonel," Sophia said quietly, approaching Mitchell with her tactical assessment, "based on their current position and the enemy missile deployment pattern, they have approximately 8 minutes before those SAM sites achieve optimal firing solutions." Her voice carried the calm authority of someone who had spent months studying every detail of the operational area. The terrain channels them into a kill zone unless they can gain significant altitude quickly. Mitchell studied Sophia's tactical plot with growing concern. The enemy had positioned their missile batteries with professional precision, creating overlapping fields of fire that would be nearly impossible to evade using conventional tactics. "Options?" he asked curtly, recognizing that his reserve pilot possessed knowledge that might save his primary flight crews. "There's a valley approach from the southwest," Sophia replied, tracing the route on her map. "It's narrow and requires precise navigation, but it's the only direction not covered by active missile sites. The problem is the approach angle. It requires someone with intimate knowledge of the terrain features to navigate safely." She had memorized every ridgeline and valley in the region during her months of studying reconnaissance photographs and topographical surveys. The radio erupted with urgent transmissions as Sullivan and Rodriguez attempted evasive maneuvers while enemy radar systems locked onto their aircraft. "Base, we're taking missile fire. Repeat, missiles in the air." The distinctive alarm tones of aircraft warning systems could be heard in the background, indicating that both F-16s were now actively defending against incoming surface-to-air missiles. Sophia watched the tactical display with growing alarm as the two aircraft symbols maneuvered desperately to avoid the missile threats. Her extensive simulation training had prepared her for exactly this scenario, but watching it unfold in real time with actual pilots in mortal danger created an emotional intensity that no training exercise could replicate. These were her squadron mates, regardless of how they had treated her, and they were facing death in a situation she was uniquely qualified to address. "Falcon 1, status report," Colonel Mitchell demanded over the radio. Sullivan's response came between the sounds of his aircraft's defensive systems engaging incoming missiles. "We've evaded the first salvo, but fuel is becoming critical. We need immediate extraction, or we're going down in hostile territory." The implications were clear. Capture by Serbian forces would create an international incident while potentially revealing classified NATO operational capabilities. Lieutenant Rodriguez's aircraft had sustained minor damage from missile fragments, limiting his maneuvering capabilities and making him increasingly vulnerable to follow-up attacks. "Base, Falcon 2 has lost hydraulic pressure in the primary flight control system. I can maintain level flight, but combat maneuvering is severely compromised." His situation was deteriorating rapidly, transforming a dangerous scenario into a potential catastrophe. Sophia realized that conventional rescue operations would be impossible given the enemy missile coverage and the remote location of the trapped aircraft. The standard protocols called for waiting until electronic warfare aircraft could suppress the enemy air defenses, but that process would take hours that Sullivan and Rodriguez didn't have. Someone would need to fly into the combat zone immediately, using unconventional tactics to extract the endangered pilots before their fuel ran out, or enemy forces captured them. The moment she had been preparing for during 3 years of dismissed readiness had finally arrived. Colonel Mitchell's face had turned ashen as he processed the deteriorating situation. 2 of his best pilots were trapped in hostile territory with limited fuel, damaged aircraft, and enemy forces closing in on their position. Standard rescue Protocols required coordination with multiple NATO commands, electronic warfare support, and search and rescue helicopters, resources that would take hours to organize, while his pilots had minutes to survive. "Sir," Sophia said, her voice steady despite the chaos surrounding them, "I know that terrain better than anyone in the squadron. I've studied every valley, every ridgeline, every potential landing site in that region. There's a rescue route, but it requires someone who understands the geography intimately." Her months of preparation, dismissed by others as excessive diligence, had suddenly become the squadron's most valuable asset. Major Thompson burst into the operations center, his usual swagger replaced by urgent concern. "Colonel, what's the situation with our birds?" His question was answered by another emergency transmission from the trapped aircraft, with Sullivan reporting that enemy ground forces were now moving toward their position. The reconnaissance mission had become a combat survival scenario with international implications. "We need immediate extraction." Sullivan's voice crackled through static. "Estimate 20 minutes before ground forces reach our position. Rodriguez's aircraft is losing altitude. He's not going to make it back without assistance." The tactical display showed Rodriguez's F-16 descending slowly, his damaged hydraulic systems making controlled flight increasingly difficult. Sophia had been calculating fuel consumption, flight times, and tactical options while the command staff discussed conventional rescue scenarios. Her analysis revealed what everyone was beginning to understand, but no one wanted to acknowledge. Traditional rescue operations would arrive too late to save either pilot. Someone needed to fly into the combat zone immediately, using terrain masking and unconventional approach routes to avoid the enemy missile sites. "Colonel," she said, stepping forward with the confidence of someone who had been waiting years for this moment, "I can reach them. The backup F-16 is fueled and ready. I know the approach route that avoids the SAM sites, and I understand the terrain well enough to navigate at low altitude without GPS assistance." Her proposal represented a radical departure from standard military protocols, but desperate situations demanded innovative solutions. The operations center fell silent as everyone processed the implications of her suggestion. Major Thompson was the first to voice the obvious objection. "Volkov, you're talking about flying a single aircraft rescue mission into active combat zones. That's not a backup pilot mission, that's a suicide run." His concern was genuine, but it also reflected the underlying assumption that reserve pilots weren't capable of handling complex combat operations. "Sir," Sophia replied, maintaining eye contact with Colonel Mitchell, "I've been training for this exact scenario for 3 years. I know the enemy defensive patterns, I understand the terrain limitations, and I have the technical knowledge to execute a low-altitude extraction under combat conditions." Her statement carried the quiet authority of someone who had prepared extensively for an opportunity that others assumed would never arrive. "Lieutenant, Rodriguez's situation continued deteriorating as his aircraft lost more altitude and his fuel consumption increased due to the damaged systems. Base, I'm showing multiple engine warning lights. Estimate 15 minutes of flight time remaining before I'm forced to attempt an emergency landing." His location was deep in hostile territory, where capture would be certain and survival unlikely. Colonel Mitchell faced the impossible decision that would define his command and potentially determine the fate of 2 pilots under his responsibility. Standard protocols provided no viable solutions for the current crisis. Electronic warfare aircraft were hours away. Search and rescue helicopters couldn't operate under active missile threats, and waiting for proper support would guarantee the loss of both aircraft and their pilots. Sophia could see the colonel's internal struggle as he weighed the risks of authorizing an unprecedented rescue mission against the certainty of losing his pilots if he followed conventional procedures. "Colonel," she said quietly, "Rodriguez taught me advanced low-altitude navigation techniques during my first month here. Sullivan showed me how to execute emergency extractions in mountainous terrain. They may not respect me as an equal, but they trained me well enough to save their lives. The irony wasn't lost on anyone in the operations center. The pilots who had spent years dismissing Sophia as inadequate backup, personnel had unknowingly provided her with the exact skills needed for their rescue. Their casual instruction during routine training exercises had prepared her for the most critical mission of her career. Even though they had never intended to provide her with such opportunities, Major Thompson approached Colonel Mitchell with obvious reluctance. "Sir, if we're seriously considering this, we need to understand that we're sending an untested pilot into active combat conditions. Backup Volkov has never flown a real combat mission." His use of her dismissive nickname highlighted the persistent attitudes that had kept Sophia sidelined despite her qualifications. "Major," Colonel Mitchell replied, his voice carrying newfound respect, "Captain Volkov has been preparing for combat operations longer and more thoroughly than most of our primary pilots. Perhaps it's time we stopped calling her backup and started recognizing her as our most knowledgeable pilot for this specific mission." The decision that would change everything was about to be made. Colonel Mitchell's radio crackled with an incoming transmission from NATO Command Headquarters. "Aviano Base, this is Thunder Mountain Command. We're tracking your emergency situation. Standard protocol requires you to maintain defensive positions until electronic warfare support arrives in approximately 4 hours. The bureaucratic response highlighted the fundamental disconnect between command center planning and battlefield reality. "Thunder Mountain, our pilots will be captured or killed long before your support arrives," Colonel Mitchell replied, his frustration evident in every word. "We need immediate authorization for emergency rescue operations using available assets." He was requesting permission to deploy Sophia on a mission that violated every conventional military protocol, but conventional solutions had already proven inadequate for the current crisis. The response from headquarters came swiftly and definitively. "Negative, Aviano Base. You are not authorized to deploy untested personnel into active combat zones. Maintain current defensive posture and await proper support assets." The voice on the radio belonged to someone who had never watched pilots dying in real time while bureaucratic procedures prevented immediate action. Major Thompson stepped closer to Colonel Mitchell, lowering his voice to avoid being overheard by the radio operators. "Sir, headquarters doesn't understand the tactical situation. They're making decisions based on standard protocols that don't account for our specific circumstances." His willingness to question higher authority reflected the desperate nature of their situation and his growing recognition that unconventional problems required unconventional solutions. Sophia had been monitoring the enemy radio frequencies using her intelligence training, and what she discovered made the situation even more urgent. "Colonel," she said, approaching with translated intercepts, "Serbian ground forces are coordinating a systematic search pattern. They know exactly where our aircraft went down, and they're moving multiple units to surround the area." Her language skills, another asset that had been underutilized by the squadron, provided critical intelligence about enemy intentions. The tactical display showed enemy ground units moving with purpose and coordination, suggesting that the missile ambush had been part of a larger operation designed to capture NATO pilots for propaganda purposes. Rodriguez's damaged aircraft would be unable to evade ground-based search teams, and Sullivan's fuel situation prevented him from maintaining evasive maneuvers indefinitely. Time was running out with mathematical precision. "Thunder Mountain Command. This is Colonel Mitchell," he transmitted with barely controlled anger. "My pilots have less than 30 minutes before enemy capture. I'm requesting immediate authorization for emergency rescue using Captain Volkov, who possesses unique knowledge of the operational area." His use of Sophia's rank rather than her dismissive nickname represented a significant shift in how the command staff viewed her capabilities. The response from headquarters was predictably bureaucratic. Aviano Base, Captain Volkov is classified as reserve personnel without combat mission authorization. Deploying unauthorized personnel into hostile territory violates multiple NATO operational directives. You will await proper support assets. The voice carried the absolute certainty of someone making life-and-death decisions from the safety of a command bunker hundreds of miles away. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice broke through the radio traffic with increasing desperation. "Base, I'm losing engine power and my hydraulic systems are failing completely. I need to attempt an emergency landing within the next 10 minutes, or I'm going to lose control entirely." His aircraft was dying around him while headquarters debated procedural compliance, creating a situation where following orders would guarantee his death or capture. Sophia watched Colonel Mitchell's face as he processed the impossible choice between following orders and saving lives. Military careers were destroyed by disobeying direct commands from superior officers, but pilots died when commanders prioritized bureaucratic procedures over tactical reality. The decision he made in the next few minutes would define his legacy and determine whether 2 of his pilots returned home alive. "Colonel," Major Thompson said quietly, "if we follow headquarters orders, we're condemning Rodriguez to capture and probably Sullivan as well. But if we violate those orders and something goes wrong, you'll face a court-martial." The brutal calculus of military command meant that Mitchell would be held responsible regardless of whether he chose to follow ineffective orders or implement necessary but unauthorized rescue operations. That Captain Sullivan's latest transmission added another layer of urgency to the developing crisis. "Base, I can see enemy vehicles approaching Rodriguez's position. Multiple trucks and what appears to be a mobile command unit. They're definitely conducting an organized search operation." The Serbian forces were moving with military precision, suggesting that capturing NATO pilots was a high-priority objective that had been planned well in advance. Sophia stepped forward, her voice carrying the quiet determination of someone who had been preparing for this moment throughout her entire military career. "Sir, I understand the risks and I accept full responsibility for the mission outcome. Rodriguez and Sullivan are running out of time, and I'm the only pilot who can reach them before enemy forces arrive." Her willingness to accept personal responsibility for the unauthorized mission provided Colonel Mitchell with the moral cover. He needed to make an impossible decision. The radio fell silent as everyone in the operations center realized that the next few seconds would determine whether the squadron followed orders or followed conscience. Colonel Mitchell looked at Sophia with the recognition that she had become his only viable option for saving 2 pilots' lives. "Captain Volkov," he said formally, "you are authorized for emergency rescue operations." The authorization had barely left Colonel Mitchell's lips when Major Thompson's radio erupted with an angry transmission from Thunder Mountain Command. "Aviano Base, we are monitoring your communications. You are expressly forbidden from deploying reserve personnel into combat zones. Any violation of this directive will result in immediate disciplinary action." The voice carried the cold authority of superior officers who had never faced the choice between following orders and saving lives. Sophia was already moving toward the flight line, her years of preparation allowing her to transition from standby status to active mission in minutes rather than hours. She had memorized every step of the pre-flight sequence, studied every system on the backup F-16, and rehearsed emergency procedures until they had become automatic responses. Her readiness was about to be tested under conditions that no simulation could replicate. "Captain Volkov, halt immediately," came another transmission from headquarters. "You are not authorized for this mission. Return to the operations center and await further instructions." The bureaucratic voice belonged to someone who could destroy her military career with a single disciplinary report. But Sophia understood that some things mattered more than career advancement. Rodriguez and Sullivan were dying while headquarters debated procedural compliance. Colonel Mitchell's face showed the strain of a commander who had just violated direct orders from his superiors. Military protocol required him to countermand his authorization and prevent Sophia from launching, but his tactical judgment told him that following those protocols would guarantee the death or capture of 2 pilots under his command. The radio continued crackling with increasingly urgent demands for compliance from officers who weren't watching the tactical display. Major Thompson approached Mitchell with obvious concern. "Sir, Headquarters is threatening immediate relief of command if you proceed with this unauthorized mission. Your career will be over, and they'll probably court-martial you for disobeying direct orders." His warning reflected the brutal reality that military commanders faced when operational necessity conflicted with bureaucratic directives. Saving lives sometimes required sacrificing careers. Sophia had reached the flight line, where Sergeant Gonzalez was conducting final checks on the backup F-16. "Captain, are you sure about this?" Gonzalez asked, her face reflecting years of experience with military politics. "They're going to crucify anyone involved in an unauthorized combat mission." Her concern was genuine, but she also recognized that some situations demanded action regardless of the personal consequences. "Sergeant, I've been preparing for this mission for 3 years, Sophia replied, pulling on her flight helmet with steady hands. "Rodriguez and Sullivan don't have time for me to worry about career implications." Her voice carried the calm determination of someone who had found their moment of purpose after years of waiting on the sidelines. This was why she had become a pilot, and no amount of bureaucratic intimidation would prevent her from fulfilling that purpose. The radio in the operations center continued broadcasting threats and demands from Thunder Mountain Command. "Colonel Mitchell, you are relieved of operational authority effective immediately. Major Thompson, you are ordered to prevent any unauthorized aircraft departures and place Captain Volkov under arrest for violation of direct orders." The escalating threats revealed how seriously headquarters viewed unauthorized combat operations, even when those operations represented the only viable rescue option. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice cut through the administrative chaos with increasing desperation. "Base, enemy ground forces are less than 5 minutes from my position. I can see troops dismounting from vehicles and beginning systematic search patterns. If someone's coming to get me, they need to move now." His transmission provided stark context for the bureaucratic battle raging in the operations center. While headquarters debated procedural compliance, actual pilots were facing capture or death. Major Thompson faced his own impossible choice as he watched Sophia complete her pre-flight preparations. Following orders meant arresting one of his pilots and guaranteeing the loss of 2 others, but disobeying orders meant ending his own military career. "Colonel," he said quietly, "what are your orders?" His question represented a moment of truth for everyone involved in the developing crisis. "Colonel." Mitchell looked at the tactical display, showing enemy forces converging on Rodriguez's position, then at the radio transmitting increasingly angry demands from headquarters. "Major, I didn't hear any unauthorized aircraft departures, did you?" His statement provided plausible deniability for Thompson while allowing Sophia to proceed with the rescue mission. Military careers were built on such moments of selective blindness when higher purposes demanded creative interpretation of orders. Sophia's F-16 engines spooled up with their distinctive whine as she completed final system checks. 3 years of preparation had led to this moment when she would finally prove that backup Volkov possessed the skills and courage to execute the most dangerous mission of her career. The radio continued crackling with threats and demands, but she had learned to tune out voices that prioritized procedures over people. "Thunder Mountain Command, this is Falcon 3 departing for emergency rescue operations," she transmitted calmly as her aircraft began rolling toward the runway. The use of an active call sign rather than her reserve designation marked her transformation from backup pilot to combat operator. Headquarters would have to court-martial her after she saved her squadron mates' lives. Sophia's F-16 lifted off from Aviano Air Base at 11:34 hours, climbing rapidly into clear Mediterranean skies that belied the deadly situation developing 40 miles northeast. Her aircraft carried minimal armament, 2 air-to-air missiles, and a full load of cannon ammunition, because the mission had been planned as reconnaissance rather than combat operations. She would be flying into a hostile environment with limited defensive capabilities, relying entirely on speed, stealth, and tactical knowledge to accomplish what an entire rescue squadron couldn't achieve safely. The radio immediately exploded, with furious transmissions from Thunder Mountain Command. Falcon 3, you are ordered to return to base immediately. This is a direct command from NATO operational headquarters. Acknowledge and comply. The voice carried the absolute authority of officers who could end military careers with a single disciplinary report, but Sophia had already committed herself to a course of action that made career considerations irrelevant. Thunder Mountain, Falcon 3 acknowledging transmission. She replied calmly while setting her aircraft's navigation system for the dangerous route she had memorized during months of theoretical mission planning. Proceeding with emergency rescue operations under local command authority. Her response would be recorded and used as evidence in the court-martial proceedings that would inevitably follow. But Rodriguez and Sullivan needed immediate assistance that bureaucratic procedures couldn't provide. Lieutenant Rodriguez's voice crackled through her headset with increasing desperation. Any station, this is Falcon 2. Enemy ground forces have reached my aircraft. I'm attempting evasion on foot, but they're conducting systematic search patterns with multiple teams. His transmission meant that the window for aircraft extraction had closed, transforming the rescue mission into a ground recovery operation that would require landing in hostile territory under enemy fire. Captain Sullivan's situation had also deteriorated during the bureaucratic delays. Falcon 3, this is Falcon 1. My fuel situation is critical, and I'm showing multiple system failures. Estimate 8 minutes of flight time remaining before forced landing. His aircraft was dying around him while Sophia raced through mountainous terrain toward a rescue attempt that conventional military wisdom considered impossible for a single pilot to execute successfully. Sophia activated her aircraft's terrain following radar and dropped to an altitude of less than 200 feet above the rugged landscape, using valleys and ridge lines to mask her approach from enemy surveillance systems. The route she had chosen during her extensive mission planning would take her through narrow mountain passes that larger rescue aircraft couldn't navigate safely, but it also required precision flying that left no margin for error at high speed and low altitude. Thunder Mountain Command continued broadcasting increasingly urgent demands for her return. Falcon 3, you are in violation of direct orders from NATO Operational Command. Your actions constitute insubordination and unauthorized combat operations. You will face immediate court-martial upon return to base. The threats would have been intimidating under normal circumstances, but Sophia had spent 3 years being threatened with career consequences for various infractions of military protocol. Her terrain navigation proved flawless as she threaded through mountain passes that she had studied but never flown, using landmarks that she had memorized from reconnaissance photographs to guide her toward the enemy-controlled area where her squadron mates were fighting for survival. The landscape below showed signs of recent military activity, vehicle tracks, communication antennas, and camouflage positions that confirmed intelligence reports about Serbian force deployments. Falcon 1, Falcon 3, en route to your position, she transmitted to Sullivan. Estimate arrival in 4 minutes. Prepare for emergency extraction procedures. Her calm professional tone masked the reality that she was attempting a rescue mission that had never been tried under these conditions. Single aircraft extractions from hostile territory required perfect coordination between ground and air assets, with no room for miscommunication or equipment failure. Rodriguez's voice returned to the radio with urgent updates about his ground situation. Falcon 3, enemy forces have split into multiple search teams. I count at least 20 personnel with vehicles and communication equipment. They're professional military, not irregular forces. His assessment meant that the Serbian deployment was more substantial than intelligence reports had indicated, suggesting that the missile ambush had been part of a larger operation to capture NATO personnel. Sophia's aircraft screamed through a narrow valley at 400 knots, her wingtips clearing the rocky walls by mere feet as she executed navigation that required split-second timing and absolute confidence in her route planning. The maneuvers she was performing had been practiced countless times in simulators, but the psychological pressure of real combat conditions with actual lives depending on her success created stress levels that no training exercise could replicate. Sullivan's latest transmission carried the finality of a pilot who had exhausted all options. Falcon 3, I'm beginning emergency landing procedures. Engine failure is imminent, and I have insufficient fuel for continued flight operations. His words meant that Sophia would need to locate and extract 2 downed pilots from separate locations, while enemy forces converged on both positions. The mission that had started as a simple reconnaissance flight had become the most complex rescue operation in recent NATO history, and its success depended entirely on a pilot whom everyone had dismissed as inadequate backup personnel. As Sophia approached the combat zone, an unexpected voice joined the radio frequency. Colonel Maria Santos from the 31st Fighter Wings Search and Rescue Coordination Center. Falcon 3, this is Rescue Control. We've been monitoring your unauthorized mission, and we're here to provide support. Her transmission violated multiple protocols, but it also provided Sophia with the professional backup that could make the difference between mission success and catastrophic failure. Rescue Control, Falcon 3 acknowledging your support. Sophia replied, her voice carrying newfound confidence as she realized she wouldn't be facing the enemy alone. What assets do you have available? The question was tactically sound, but operationally impossible. Official rescue assets couldn't be deployed without proper authorization, and headquarters had explicitly forbidden any support for her unauthorized mission. Colonel Santos' response revealed the creative solutions that experienced military officers developed when bureaucratic procedures conflicted with operational necessity. Falcon 3, we have unofficial monitoring capabilities and communication support. Additionally, Sergeant Rodriguez, Lieutenant Rodriguez's brother, is providing tactical intelligence from our operations center. The family connection meant that unofficial assistance was flowing through personal relationships rather than official command channels. Sergeant Miguel Rodriguez, stationed at the Rescue Coordination Center, had been tracking his brother's situation with growing desperation. Falcon 3, I have current enemy positions based on Tommy's ground observations. The Serbian forces are operating in 3-man teams with radio coordination, but they're not using encrypted communications. His intelligence analysis provided Sophia with real-time information about enemy movements that official CHANNELs couldn't supply. The tactical picture became clearer as multiple sources of unofficial support converged to assist Sophia's unauthorized rescue mission. Falcon 3, Colonel Santos transmitted. We're also receiving assistance from Captain Elena Petrov, a Serbian-American translator who's monitoring enemy radio frequencies. The ethnic connections within NATO forces created informal networks that could provide capabilities unavailable through official bureaucratic channels. Captain Petrov's voice joined the frequency with critical intelligence about enemy intentions. Falcon 3, Serbian ground forces are reporting to higher command about capturing NATO pilots. They've been ordered to take prisoners alive for propaganda purposes, which gives you additional time but also increases the political stakes. Her translation capabilities provided insights into enemy decision-making that could prove crucial for mission planning. Sophia's aircraft had reached the edge of the combat zone, where her extensive terrain knowledge became essential for navigating the complex landscape while avoiding enemy detection. Rescue control, I'm approaching Sullivan's position from the southwest valley approach. Enemy SAM sites are still active, but they're focused on higher altitude threats. Her route planning had successfully exploited gaps in enemy defensive coverage that conventional rescue aircraft couldn't utilize. Sullivan's voice crackled through her headset with coordinates for his emergency landing site. Falcon 3, I'm down in a clearing approximately 2 clicks north of the main valley. Aircraft is intact but non-operational. I have visual contact with enemy search teams moving from the east. His situation was stable for the moment, but enemy forces were systematically searching every potential landing site in the area. The informal support network continued expanding as more personnel volunteered unofficial assistance despite the career risks involved. Sergeant Gonzalez from Sophia's maintenance team joined the frequency with technical information about aircraft capabilities. Falcon 3, your bird is carrying modified fuel tanks that give you an additional 30 minutes of flight time. We installed them during routine maintenance last week. Her disclosure revealed that ground crews had been quietly preparing for extended missions without official authorization. Rodriguez's ground situation had stabilized temporarily as he successfully evaded the initial search teams. Falcon 3. I found defensible terrain about 1 click west of my aircraft. Enemy forces are concentrated around the crash site, but they haven't expanded their search pattern yet. His military training was serving him well in the survival situation, but time remained critically limited before enemy reinforcements arrived. Colonel Santos coordinated the unofficial support network with professional efficiency despite the complete lack of official authorization. Falcon 3, we have additional intelligence from satellite reconnaissance showing enemy force dispositions. The information is being transmitted through unofficial channels, but it's current and reliable. The informal assistance represented a remarkable demonstration of military personnel prioritizing mission success over procedural compliance. Sophia realized that her unauthorized rescue mission had evolved into something unprecedented, a completely informal military operation coordinated through personal relationships and professional solidarity, rather than official command structures. Rescue control, I understand that everyone providing support is risking their careers for this mission. I want you to know that I accept full responsibility for any consequences. Her acknowledgement of the shared risk created a bond of mutual commitment that transcended normal military hierarchies. The radio fell briefly silent as everyone involved processed the magnitude of what they were attempting. An unauthorized combat mission supported by informal networks of military personnel who had chosen conscience over career security. Falcon 3, Colonel Santos finally replied. We're all in this together now. Let's bring our people home. Sophia's aircraft approached Sullivan's position with the confidence that comes from knowing that professional competence and personal courage had created an alliance that bureaucratic obstacles couldn't defeat. Sophia's F-16 roared through the narrow valley at treetop level, her aircraft's terrain-following radar painting a precise picture of the mountainous landscape that separated her from Sullivan's emergency landing site. The route she had memorized during months of theoretical planning was proving accurate under combat conditions, but executing high-speed navigation through terrain that offered no margin for error required absolute confidence in her preparation and abilities. Falcon 1, Falcon 3 approaching from your 6 o'clock, she transmitted to Sullivan while simultaneously monitoring enemy radio frequencies through her aircraft's intelligence gathering systems. Estimate 30 seconds to visual contact. Prepare for immediate extraction. Her calm professional tone masked the complexity of what she was attempting. A single aircraft rescue from hostile territory while enemy forces conducted systematic search operations. Sullivan's voice carried the relief of a pilot who had accepted the possibility of death or capture. Falcon 3, I have visual on your aircraft. Enemy search teams are approximately 800 meters east of my position and moving. Closer, we need to move fast. His assessment provided crucial tactical information about the narrow window of opportunity available for extraction before Serbian forces discovered his location. Captain Petrov's voice crackled through the radio with translated intelligence. From enemy communications, Falcon 3, Serbian ground commander, is reporting NATO aircraft activity in the area. They're requesting air support and additional ground units. Her translation revealed that Sophia's rescue mission had been detected by enemy forces, transforming a covert extraction into a race against time before Serbian reinforcements arrived. Sophia spotted Sullivan's position and began the complex approach maneuvers necessary for landing on rough terrain while maintaining awareness of enemy positions and potential escape routes. Her months of studying this exact area allowed her to identify suitable landing approaches that wouldn't be obvious to enemy observers, using natural terrain features to mask her aircraft from ground-based surveillance. Rescue control, Falcon 3 beginning landing approach. She transmitted while configuring her aircraft for the dangerous procedure of touching down in hostile territory. Enemy activity is increasing, but landing site appears secure for immediate extraction. Her assessment was based on Sullivan's ground observations and her own tactical analysis of enemy movement patterns. Colonel Santos coordinated the unofficial support network with increasing urgency as the tactical situation deteriorated. Falcon 3, satellite intelligence shows enemy reinforcements en route to your area. Estimate 10 minutes before additional ground units arrive. The timing meant that Sophia would need to complete Sullivan's extraction and locate Rodriguez before overwhelming enemy forces made any rescue attempt impossible. Sergeant Rodriguez provided updated intelligence about his brother's ground situation. Falcon 3, Tommy reports he's established a defensive position with good concealment, but enemy search teams are expanding their pattern. He estimates 15 minutes before they reach his location. The coordinated enemy response suggested that Serbian forces had anticipated NATO rescue attempts and prepared accordingly. Sophia executed a perfect, short-field landing on the improvised airstrip that Sullivan had identified, her aircraft touching down precisely where he had marked safe approach vectors. The landing required every skill she had developed during years of training that others had dismissed as excessive preparation, but now proved essential for mission success under combat conditions. Sullivan sprinted toward her aircraft as she kept the engines running for immediate departure. Falcon 3, package secure. He shouted over the engine noise while climbing into the aircraft's minimal passenger space behind the pilot's seat. His quick movement reflected years of training for exactly this type of emergency extraction, but the reality of being rescued by backup Volkov wasn't lost on either of them. Falcon 1 aboard, proceeding to Falcon 2's position. Sophia transmitted while beginning takeoff procedures under conditions that would have challenged experienced test pilots. The aircraft was now carrying additional weight that affected performance characteristics, requiring precise calculations to achieve successful takeoff from the rough terrain landing site. Enemy radio. Traffic intensified as Serbian forces detected the aircraft activity and began coordinating response measures. Captain Petrov's translations became increasingly urgent. Falcon 3, enemy commander is directing all units to converge on aircraft activity. They know you're conducting rescue operations. The tactical situation was deteriorating rapidly as surprise gave way to direct confrontation. Sophia's F-16 lifted off successfully despite the challenging conditions, climbing rapidly while turning toward Rodriguez's last known position. Sullivan's presence in the aircraft provided additional tactical intelligence and moral support, but it also meant that failure would result in 3 captured NATO personnel instead of 2, raising the stakes considerably for everyone involved in the Unauthorized mission. Tommy, hang tight, Sullivan transmitted to his squadron mate. Falcon 3 is en route to your position. This backup pilot just pulled off the most impressive extraction I've ever seen. His acknowledgement of Sophia's capabilities represented a fundamental shift in how the squadron's primary pilots viewed their previously dismissed reserve colleague. The most dangerous phase of the mission was just beginning. Rodriguez was surrounded by increasing numbers of enemy forces, and Sophia would need to locate and extract him while flying an aircraft that was now operating at the limits of its performance envelope. Everything she had learned during 3 years of preparation would be tested in the next few minutes. The tactical situation deteriorated rapidly as Sophia's F-16 approached Rodriguez's position. Enemy radio traffic had shifted from routine search operations to coordinated military response, with Serbian commanders directing multiple units toward the area where NATO rescue operations were in progress. Captain Petrov's translations painted a picture of professional military forces implementing well-rehearsed procedures for capturing enemy personnel. Falcon 3, be advised that enemy forces are deploying portable surface-to-air missiles to prevent additional aircraft operations. Colonel Santos transmitted from the Rescue Coordination Center. Satellite intelligence shows at least 3 mobile SAM units moving toward your operational area. The intelligence meant that Sophia's escape routes were being systematically eliminated, while she attempted to locate Rodriguez. Sullivan, now serving as observer and tactical advisor from the rear seat, spotted enemy vehicles converging on Rodriguez's position. Falcon 3, I count 6 military trucks and what appears to be an armored personnel carrier moving from the northeast. They're definitely conducting organized sweep operations. His assessment confirmed that Serbian forces were treating the pilot recovery as a high priority military operation rather than routine border patrol activity. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio with increasing urgency. Falcon 3, enemy search teams are within 400 meters of my position. I can hear vehicles and coordinated radio traffic. They're conducting professional military search patterns. His report indicated that the Serbian forces possessed training and equipment that exceeded intelligence estimates about their capabilities in the border region. Thunder Mountain Command chose this critical moment to escalate their threats against the unauthorized rescue mission. All stations, this is NATO Command Authority. Captain Volkov is ordered to abort current operations immediately and return to base. Any personnel providing support for unauthorized combat operations will face immediate court-martial proceedings. The transmission represented bureaucratic priorities that seemed disconnected from battlefield reality. Sophia ignored the command authority threats while focusing on the tactical problem of locating Rodriguez in terrain that was rapidly filling with enemy forces. Her extensive study of the area allowed her to identify potential hiding locations and escape routes that wouldn't be obvious to ground-based search teams. But time was running out before enemy reinforcements made any extraction impossible. Falcon 2, this is Falcon 3, she transmitted while scanning the landscape below. I need you to activate your emergency beacon for 30 seconds. Enemy forces will detect the signal, but it's the only way I can locate your exact position. Her request represented calculated risk. The beacon would help her find Rodriguez, but would also reveal his location to Serbian search teams. The emergency beacon activated briefly, providing Sophia with precise coordinates for Rodriguez's position. Simultaneously, enemy radio traffic exploded with excited transmissions as Serbian forces detected the electronic signature and began converging on the signal source. Captain Petrov's translations revealed that enemy commanders were directing all available units toward Rodriguez's location. Falcon 3, enemy forces are surrounding Tommy's position. Sergeant Rodriguez reported from the Rescue Coordination Center. We're tracking at least 20 personnel moving to establish a perimeter around his location. The coordinated enemy response suggested that Serbian military planners had anticipated NATO rescue attempts and developed specific procedures for preventing successful extractions. Sullivan spotted the tactical problem from his observer position. Falcon 3, the enemy has established blocking positions on all the obvious approach routes. We're going to need an unconventional extraction method. His assessment was accurate, but didn't provide solutions for the fundamental challenge of removing a person from hostile territory while under direct enemy observation. Sophia realized that conventional extraction procedures wouldn't work under current conditions. The enemy had too many personnel, too much firepower, and too much time to establish defensive positions around Rodriguez's location. Any attempted landing would result in her aircraft being destroyed by enemy fire, guaranteeing the capture of all 3 NATO personnel. Rescue control, Falcon 3 requesting immediate smokescreen deployment. She transmitted while formulating a desperate plan that would require perfect timing and considerable luck. I need maximum concealment for 30 seconds during extraction. Procedures. Her request represented the last resort of a pilot who understood that conventional tactics had become impossible. Colonel Santos' response revealed the limitations of unofficial support networks. Falcon 3, we don't have authorization for smokescreen deployment. You're operating without official mission support. The reality meant that Sophia would need to accomplish the extraction using only her aircraft's limited capabilities and Rodriguez's ground-based assistance. Enemy forces continued tightening their perimeter around Rodriguez's position while Serbian commanders coordinated air defense systems to prevent any rescue aircraft from escaping successfully. The tactical display painted a picture of overwhelming enemy superiority in personnel, equipment, and positioning. Falcon 2, prepare for emergency extraction. Sophia transmitted while beginning approach maneuvers that violated every principle of safe flying. This is going to be dangerous, but it's our only option. Her words carried the finality of someone who had exhausted all conventional alternatives and was about to attempt something that military training manuals specifically prohibited. The next few minutes would determine whether 3 years of dismissed preparation had adequately equipped her for the most challenging rescue mission in NATO history. Sophia studied the tactical situation with the analytical precision that had made her squadron's best mission planner, even though she had never been allowed to execute those plans until now. 20 Serbian soldiers had established a perimeter around Rodriguez's position, with vehicle-mounted weapons covering every approach route that would allow conventional aircraft landing. The enemy had positioned themselves with professional military competence, creating an impossible extraction scenario for standard rescue procedures. Falcon 2, I need you to listen carefully, she transmitted while configuring her aircraft for maneuvers that no flight manual had ever described. I'm going to execute a combat extraction that requires precise timing. When I give the signal, you'll have exactly 15 seconds to reach my aircraft. Her plan violated every principle of safe aviation, but safe aviation wouldn't save Rodriguez from capture by forces that were closing in with systematic precision. Sullivan, observing from the rear seat, recognized the suicidal nature of what Sophia was proposing. Falcon 3, what you're describing is physically impossible. No pilot has ever successfully executed vertical extraction from a hover under enemy fire. His objection was technically accurate, but technical accuracy had become irrelevant when conventional solutions had been exhausted by superior enemy positioning. Rodriguez's voice crackled through the radio with the calm acceptance of someone who understood that his rescue would require extraordinary measures. Falcon 3, I understand the risks. I'm prepared to execute emergency extraction on your signal. His military training had prepared him for dangerous situations, but nothing could have prepared him for being rescued by a pilot whose capabilities the entire squadron had systematically underestimated. Enemy radio traffic indicated that Serbian forces were preparing for immediate assault on Rodriguez's position. Captain Petrov's translations revealed the tactical timeline. Falcon 3, enemy commander is ordering final assault in 3 minutes. They're coordinating all units for simultaneous attack. The intelligence meant that Sophia's window of opportunity was measured in minutes rather than hours. Colonel Santos transmitted from the Rescue Coordination Center with desperate urgency. Falcon 3, satellite intelligence shows enemy air defense systems are now active. Multiple SAM sites have acquired tracking locks on your aircraft. The information confirmed that Sophia's escape routes were being systematically eliminated. While she attempted the most dangerous rescue maneuver in military aviation history, Sophia began her approach using terrain features to mask her aircraft from enemy detection until the last possible moment. The mountainous landscape that had provided cover during her infiltration would now become the key to Rodriguez's extraction. But executing the maneuver would require split-second timing and absolute confidence in her aircraft's capabilities. Under extreme conditions, all stations, this is Thunder Mountain Command, came the furious transmission from NATO headquarters. Captain Volkov is ordered to abort immediately. You are flying into a kill zone with multiple active threats. This is madness, not military procedure. The command authority's assessment was accurate, but Rodriguez would be captured or killed long before sensible military procedures could organize proper rescue assets. Enemy forces began their final assault on Rodriguez's position, exactly as their radio communications had indicated. Serbian soldiers moved with coordinated precision, using suppressive fire and tactical movement to eliminate his escape options while maintaining perimeter security against potential rescue attempts. Their professional competence made the extraction even more dangerous for Sophia's unauthorized rescue mission. Falcon 2, enemy assault initiated, Rodriguez transmitted while observing Serbian forces closing in on his position. I estimate 60 seconds before they reach my defensive position. His calm assessment provided Sophia with the tactical information she needed to time her extraction attempt, but it also confirmed that conventional rescue procedures had become completely impossible. Sophia's F-16 screamed through the valley at maximum speed, using terrain masking to avoid enemy detection until she reached the point where her rescue attempt would become visible to all Serbian forces simultaneously. The maneuver she was about to attempt had never been tried under combat conditions, and failure would result in the destruction of her aircraft and the capture of 3 NATO personnel. Rescue control, Falcon 3 beginning extraction approach. She transmitted while pulling her aircraft into a climbing turn that would bring her directly over Rodriguez's position at minimum altitude. If this doesn't work, tell my father I finally got to fly the mission I'd been preparing for. Her words carried the finality of someone who understood the magnitude of what she was attempting. Sullivan watched from the rear seat as Sophia configured the aircraft for maneuvers that pushed both pilot and machine beyond their design limitations. "Tommy, get ready," he transmitted to Rodriguez. "Backup Volkov is about to show us why we should never have called her backup." His acknowledgement represented complete transformation in how the squadron viewed their previously dismissed colleague. Enemy automatic weapons. Fire erupted from multiple positions as Serbian forces detected Sophia's aircraft approaching at low altitude. Tracer rounds streaked past her cockpit while surface-to-air missiles launched from concealed positions, creating a lethal environment that no pilot was expected to survive. The wall of enemy fire represented everything that military planners feared about unauthorized rescue operations. Sophia pulled her aircraft into a vertical climb directly over Rodriguez's position, executing the most dangerous maneuver of her career while enemy fire concentrated on her aircraft from all directions. 3 years of dismissed preparation had led to this moment when backup Volkov would prove that underestimated people could accomplish impossible things. Sophia's F-16 hung in a vertical hover directly above Rodriguez's position, defying every principle of physics and military aviation while enemy fire erupted from all directions. The maneuver she was executing existed only in theoretical aerodynamics. Textbooks and experimental test programs, never attempted under combat conditions where failure meant death. Her aircraft shuddered under the stress of maintaining controlled flight, at the absolute limits of its performance envelope. "Now! Move now!" she shouted over the radio while maintaining perfect position despite the wall of enemy fire converging on her aircraft. Rodriguez sprinted from his concealed position toward the hovering F-16, covering open ground while Serbian forces concentrated their fire on both the aircraft and the running pilot. The extraction window would last exactly 15 seconds before fuel consumption and structural stress forced her to abandon the attempt. Sullivan watched in amazement from the rear seat as Sophia executed flying that he had never seen attempted by any pilot in his military career. "Impossible," he whispered, then transmitted urgently. "Tommy, grab the extraction cable. She's holding this bird in a hover that violates the laws of physics." The extraction cable deployment was a field modification that Sergeant Gonzalez had installed without authorization, providing emergency rescue capability that wasn't part of standard F-16 configurations. Rodriguez reached the aircraft exactly as enemy forces achieved clear firing solutions on both targets. Serbian automatic weapons concentrated on the stationary aircraft while Rodriguez climbed the extraction cable with desperate speed. Enemy bullets struck the aircraft's fuselage and wings, causing system failures and structural damage that threatened immediate catastrophe. Warning lights illuminated Sophia's cockpit as critical systems began failing under enemy fire. "Package secure," Rodriguez shouted as he reached the aircraft's modified passenger compartment. Sophia immediately pulled out of the hover and into a climbing turn that took her aircraft directly through the concentrated fire of 20 enemy weapons. The maneuver required instantaneous transition from hover to high-speed flight while maintaining control of an aircraft that was now carrying maximum passenger load and suffering battle damage. Enemy surface-to-air missiles launched simultaneously from 3 positions as Serbian forces realized their targets were escaping. The missiles streaked toward Sophia's aircraft with guidance systems designed to destroy much larger and less maneuverable targets. She executed evasive maneuvers that pushed her damaged aircraft beyond safe operating limits, while climbing rapidly to escape the effective range of enemy ground fire. "Falcon 3, you have multiple missiles tracking," Colonel Santos transmitted from the Rescue Coordination Center. "Recommend immediate evasive action." Her warning was unnecessary. Sophia was already executing defensive maneuvers that used every technique she had learned during years of simulation training that others had considered excessive preparation for scenarios that would never occur. The first missile detonated, close enough to shower her aircraft with metal fragments, causing additional system failures and reducing her maneuverability significantly. The second missile missed entirely as she executed a barrel roll that brought her aircraft dangerously close to the mountainous terrain below. The third missile was defeated by terrain masking as she dove into a narrow valley that provided cover from the enemy guidance systems. Captain Petrov's voice crackled through the radio with translated enemy communications. "Falcon 3, Serbian. Commander is reporting that NATO pilots have escaped and requesting immediate Air Force response." The translation revealed that enemy forces understood they had failed to prevent the rescue, but were now coordinating aerial pursuit using fighter aircraft that could challenge Sophia's damaged F-16. Sullivan and Rodriguez exchanged glances in the aircraft's cramped passenger compartment as they processed what had just occurred. The pilot they had dismissed as inadequate backup personnel had just executed the most dangerous rescue maneuver in military aviation history, saving both their lives through flying skills that exceeded anything they had witnessed during their combined decades of military service. "Control, this is Falcon 3 with 2 packages secure," Sophia transmitted while nursing her damaged aircraft toward friendly airspace. Request immediate medical support and damage assessment upon return. To base. Her calm professional tone masked the reality that she was flying a severely damaged aircraft that was consuming fuel at rates that threatened her ability to reach Aviano Air Base. Thunder Mountain Command's radio traffic had shifted from threats to amazement. Falcon 3, this is NATO Command Authority. Acknowledge successful extraction of both pilots. How did you accomplish vertical hover extraction under enemy fire? The question revealed that even headquarters personnel were struggling to understand how unauthorized rescue mission had succeeded where conventional operations would have failed. Rodriguez's voice carried profound gratitude and recognition as he transmitted to his brother at the Rescue Coordination Center. Miguel, tell everyone that backup Volkov just pulled off the most incredible rescue in NATO history. She saved our lives using flying skills that none of us knew existed. His acknowledgement represented complete transformation in how the squadron viewed their previously dismissed colleague. Sophia's aircraft limped through the mountain valleys toward home, carrying 2 pilots who would never again question her capabilities and a story that would redefine how military aviation assessed pilot qualifications. The backup pilot had become the squadron's most accomplished combat aviator in a single mission that proved extraordinary. Things could be achieved by people whom others systematically underestimated. The impossible rescue was complete, but the consequences were just beginning. Sophia's damaged F-16 touched down at Aviano Air Base at 13:47 hours, 3 hours and 13 minutes after what was supposed to have been a routine reconnaissance mission. Emergency vehicles surrounded the aircraft as ground crews assessed battle damage that told the story of the most audacious rescue mission in NATO history. Bullet holes punctured the fuselage, missile fragments had shredded control surfaces, and hydraulic fluid leaked from multiple system failures. Yet somehow the aircraft had brought 3 pilots home alive. Colonel Mitchell waited on the tarmac with an expression that mixed relief, amazement, and professional concern. The unauthorized mission had succeeded beyond all expectations, but its success had been achieved through violations of direct orders from NATO Command Authority. Military careers would be destroyed or transformed based on the decisions made in the next few hours, and those decisions would establish precedents for how the alliance handled future crisis situations. Sullivan and Rodriguez emerged from the aircraft's cramped passenger compartment with the demeanor of pilots who had witnessed flying that redefined their understanding of what was possible. "Colonel," Sullivan said, his voice carrying newfound respect, "Captain Volkov just executed maneuvers that I didn't know were physically possible. She saved our lives through flying skills that exceed anything in our training manuals." His acknowledgement represented complete transformation from the pilot who had coined the dismissive backup Volkov, nicknamed at the debriefing room filled with personnel from multiple commands as word spread throughout the base about the unauthorized rescue mission. Brigadier General Patricia Hayes, NATO's deputy commander for Southern Europe, had flown directly from Naples to investigate reports of insubordination that had somehow resulted in successful combat operations. Her arrival signaled that the incident would have consequences extending far beyond Aviano Air Base. "Captain Volkov," General Hayes began, her voice carrying the authority of someone who had spent decades managing military crises, "you violated direct orders from NATO Command Authority, conducted unauthorized combat operations, and engaged enemy forces without proper authorization. These actions constitute serious breaches of military discipline." Her statement outlined charges that could end Sophia's military career and result in imprisonment. Under military justice codes, Sophia stood at attention with the composure of someone who had accepted the consequences of necessary action. "General, I understand the charges against me. However, Lieutenant Rodriguez and Captain Sullivan would have been captured or killed if we had followed standard procedures. Military personnel have a duty to preserve life when possible. even when that duty conflicts with bureaucratic protocols. Her response demonstrated the moral reasoning that had guided her unauthorized mission. Rodriguez stepped forward with testimony that would prove crucial for the investigation. General, Captain Volkov's knowledge of the operational area exceeded that of any pilot in our squadron. Her tactical planning was flawless, her flying skills were extraordinary, and her courage under fire saved our lives. She accomplished what conventional rescue operations couldn't achieve. His defense of Sophia represented acknowledgement that expertise and capability mattered more than official designations. The investigation revealed systematic problems with NATO's crisis response procedures that had made unauthorized action necessary for mission success. General Hayes reviewed communication transcripts showing that headquarters had prioritized bureaucratic compliance over pilot survival, creating conditions where field commanders faced impossible choices between following orders and saving lives. The incident highlighted fundamental conflicts between institutional procedures and operational reality. Furthermore, Sullivan added during his testimony, Captain Volkov's extensive preparation during her reserve duty proved essential for mission success. While we dismissed her diligence as excessive, she was actually developing capabilities that none of us possessed. His admission revealed how the squadron's exclusionary culture had prevented recognition of exceptional talent that existed within their own ranks. Colonel Santos from the Search and Rescue Coordination Center provided additional testimony about the informal support network that had assisted Sophia's mission. General, multiple personnel violated regulations to provide intelligence and communication support because they recognized that official procedures were inadequate for the tactical situation. This wasn't insubordination. It was professional judgment applied under extraordinary circumstances. Her testimony demonstrated that Sophia's actions had inspired broader recognition of institutional failures. The medical examination revealed the physical toll of Sophia's unprecedented flying performance. Flight surgeons documented stress indicators that showed she had operated her aircraft beyond normal human physiological limits, while maintaining perfect tactical awareness and decision-making capability. The medical evidence supported technical assessments that her rescue maneuvers had required flying skills that exceeded established military standards. General Hayes' final assessment surprised everyone involved in the investigation. Captain Volkov, your actions violated explicit orders and military protocols. However, your technical expertise, tactical judgment, and moral courage prevented the loss of NATO personnel and demonstrated capabilities that our current pilot assessment systems failed to recognize. Her statement indicated that consequences would extend beyond individual disciplinary action to institutional reform. Effective immediately, the general continued, you are promoted to major and assigned as NATO's new Director of Combat Rescue Operations. Your extensive knowledge of unconventional tactics and crisis response will be used to develop new training programs for pilots facing similar situations. The promotion represented recognition that extraordinary circumstances had revealed extraordinary capabilities that deserved institutional support rather than bureaucratic punishment. The transformation extended throughout the 555th Fighter Squadron. As pilots reassessed their assumptions about capability, leadership, and professional recognition, Major Thompson publicly apologized for years of dismissive treatment, acknowledging that prejudice had prevented recognition of exceptional talent. The squadron's culture began shifting toward merit-based evaluation rather than social hierarchies that excluded qualified personnel. Rodriguez and Sullivan requested assignment to Sophia's new combat rescue program, recognizing that their survival had resulted from expertise they wanted to learn and capabilities they wanted to develop. Major Volkov, Rodriguez said during the ceremony celebrating her promotion, you proved that the most important qualifications for military leadership are competence, courage, and commitment to protecting the people under your command. 6 months later, Major Sophia Volkov stood before a class of combat pilots at the NATO Defense College, teaching advanced rescue procedures to students who included some of the Alliance's most experienced aviators. Her story had become required study for military leaders learning about crisis decision-making, institutional bias, and the importance of recognizing talent regardless of its source. The most dangerous enemy of military effectiveness, she told her students, is the assumption that current procedures are adequate for future challenges. Extraordinary situations require extraordinary responses, and those responses often come from people whom others have systematically underestimated. Her words carried the authority of someone who had proven that backup personnel could become primary heroes when necessity demanded excellence over convention. The pilot they had once called Backup Volkov had become the woman who redefined what military aviation could accomplish when courage, competence, and determination converged in a moment of absolute necessity. Up next, you've got two more standout stories right on your screen. If this one hit the mark, you won't want to pass these up. Just click and check them out. And don't forget to subscribe and turn on the notification bell so you don't miss any upload from us.